Hello, hello, my love. I hope this finds you doing so well. I am really excited today to talk about the concept of the inner child. So, this concept comes from Jungian psychology, and it is the idea that as we grow and develop as humans, there are parts of our psyche, of our psychology, of our minds that stay in each phase of development. So stay in childhood, stay in infancy, stay in adolescence. And those parts are alive and well within us as we grow. So we may think of ourselves as physical adults, right? We are grown, we pay taxes, we have rents, we are adults. And yet, within each of us, within our psyches, there are children. There are those child parts that may be newborns or 2-year-olds or 4-year-olds or 12-year-olds whose bodies are changing and they're very confused. There may be that adolescent that either seeks to please, who wants everyone to love them and care about them, or who's kind of standoffish. My inner adolescence can be very standoffish sometimes. And these parts within us are part of us, right? They are us. They influence every decision we make, and the more we can be aligned with them, the more they can feel that they are attended to, befriended, they are connected with, they are held and loved. The more that we can be aligned and we can live adult lives in service of and with a focus on the healing of the wounding of those inner parts, of those childhood parts. And we can then focus on getting them into alignment with us so they can support us and we can co-create a life, right? I talk a lot in my work about helping folks how to heal codependency. And part of that is really focusing on an interdependence. As human animals, we need each other. Our nervous systems are first. Whenever we're feeling stress or trauma, the first place we go is connection, is social connection, is to turn towards someone who feels safe. And so to your inner child, when you feel dysregulated, when you feel either ramped up, activated into your sympathetic nervous system, or shut down, immobilized, sort of giving up, whatever, in that freeze state, which is the dorsal vagal state. So when we're in either part of those two parts, and it's commonly referred to and thought about as a ladder, the polyvagal ladder, when you're up in sympathetic or down in that dorsal shutdown, your body wants to come back to ventral vagal. So ventral vagal is the part of your nervous system where you're calm, everything's okay, things feel good. You're in that social, safe, connected place with the people you love and also with yourself, right? So it's that connection inward that brings so much safety, as well as turning to someone and smiling, which is challenging when we're all wearing masks. And hopefully there's someone within your household, another human, an animal. We can also talk now about resourcing. So resourcing is a concept from the world of healing trauma and nervous system work, in which we talk about our inner resources. So that inner strength that you can tap into to help you support yourself, to help you get to that ventral vagal place when you may feel that you're going somewhere else on that polyvagal ladder. And so a resource can be, it can be your glimmers, which I talked about recently, and next week's episode of the Feminist Wellness Podcast is all about glimmers. Make sure you check that out. Glimmers are the things, the people, places, smells, colors, tastes that help us to bring ourselves back to ventral vagal. I've been loving this spray from Mirasol Farms. It's an organic family-owned farm in Wisconsin? The middle somewhere. It's sandalwood and rose. And those two scents are linked through my inner child to smells that were supportive for me in my childhood. And so my adult self and my inner child both take in that aroma, and it's a glimmer. It's a moment of safety where I can connect inward and feel safe and good. So we get to lean on those resources like glimmers for our nervous system. Resources can also be connecting in with people you've never even met. A couple months ago, back before quarantine, I was leading an in-person breathwork workshop here in New York City, an all-day event. And one of the people there was sharing that she resources Dr. Maya Angelou. And when she feels stressed, upset, when things feel not ventral vagal for her, she's able to connect in with Dr. Maya Angelou, who she's never met in person, and hold that human as a resource for her inner child. So one of the things that I got probably about 20 DMs about this was a request to talk about how we talk to our inner child. And I get that that can be really, really challenging and can feel new and potentially even stressful if it's not something, if being spoken to in a kind, gentle, loving way with the tenderness that all children deserve was not something that was part of your own childhood, if that's not something that you experienced live in that way. So when I'm feeling myself getting activated, I ask myself, is my inner child present? Is my inner child driving the boat right now, right? Is she the one who's like, all right, let's go faster? Or like, just shut down, I can't deal, it's too much, right? And so I'll check in with that part of myself, and I'll do that if I'm able and it's safe to by closing my eyes, taking a deep breath in, and we focus on the exhale because that helps to bring you into ventral vagal, breathing out more carbon dioxide than you brought in. So breath in and out. Feeling my nervous system begin to reset a little bit, get a little more ventral vagal. I may bring in a glimmer, like a smell that works for me. And then I'll ask, who's here? Which of my inner children is here? How old are you? What is it that you need me to know? Right? And so I'll sit with that question, and I'll either picture my literal inner child, right? Like picture me when I was a kiddo. I just cleaned up and I moved my inner child picture. Oh well. So I'll picture actual real life little me back home in Argentina, home with my family and my friends. And I can also just picture the inner child that's coming up. It doesn't have to have a face. It doesn't have to be super specific. We're just sort of starting out with this connection and figuring this out. So I'll connect in my mind's eye, in my heart with my inner child. I'll ask, baby, what do you need? And I'll wait. I'll wait for a reply. And if you know real life physiologic children, right, people whose chronological age is 4 or 6, sometimes it takes them a minute to get it out, right? They sort of might trip over their thoughts, or they might like, well, until they can speak out whatever their truth is. And so I'll hold that same love and tenderness that I would for a real life 4 or 6 or 8-year-old in my heart, in my body, in my spirit for my inner child. So I'll hold that tenderness. I'll ask, what do you need? I'll ask, how old are you? And when I've gotten some clarity around that, and this is a question that's taken me far, how old do you think I am? Right? Because sometimes our inner children think they're talking to another child. So they need to step up and protect you, or tell you, don't do that thing, or tell you, forget about it, right? Or go faster, do it now, panic now, worry now. You can keep us safe if you panic and worry. And that creature, that sweet creature within, may be speaking that way because it thinks you're younger than you. It may not really be in a state of understanding and knowing that you're an adult and you have the capacity to take all of these actions, breathing, connecting with glimmers, yoga, journaling, right? All the things we can do, whatever body work or movement that can help to bring you back into ventral vagal, to connect with another person or an idea of a person, another resource, a creature like a sweet animal, right? It may think that you are a child that needs its protection. Once I know what it wants, I've asked it, and that little one has told me, I will be sure to get consent across the board in everything I do, consent is endlessly, vitally important, particularly for those of us who didn't have a felt experience of having consent when we were children. And I was a kid in the 80s, and, I listened to the parents in my neighborhood saying, "Baby, can you put your coat on?" And it's so different from what we grew up with back then, which was put your coat on and get in the car. And I think it was that wave of parenting, right? So whether it's those smaller ways of not feeling, well, it doesn't have to feel small, right? But that sort of arena of not feeling like you were consenting to what was happening in your life with your body, or if it was things like abuse, right? And like really feeling like all your boundaries were crossed. You couldn't give consent. You couldn't speak up for yourself. If you felt hushed, not seen as a child. I really want to empower you to show up as your best parent for yourself by asking for consent. So it could sound like, "Baby, can I give you a hug? Can I give you a high five?" Like that may be the limit of your little one's capacity. "Do you want to sit on my lap? Do you want to read a book together? Do you want to take a bath? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to pet the cat? Do you want a snack?" And so I will ask these questions with tenderness, picturing myself as a small child and how I would always want that version of me to be spoken to, with gentleness, with acceptance, with love, with consent, with care, with sweetness. And so if this feels foreign, one option could be to talk to your friends who are parents and ask them what the things are that help their actual children, like their biological aged children, to be calm, right? When we're not under quarantine, watch parents and children and look for the things, listen for the things that you could try on to talk to your inner child and see how it feels. I also highly recommend, if this concept of learning how to talk to your inner child feels really challenging, I love watching Mr. Rogers. He was just such a groundbreaking educator who really believed in speaking to children as people and meeting them at their developmental age with love and care. So I'll watch old shows of his, and I'll pay attention to the language he uses and the tone. So let's speak about tone for a second. So when we're thinking about our nervous system, we know that how you say something is often almost more important than what it is that you say. So humans are wired, our audition, our capacity to hear, is connected to the part of our vagus nerve, the ventral vagal. And so we are constantly, and there's sympathetic wiring in there too. So when we listen to the world, we are listening for cues of danger and safety. And one of the ways that we know that we are safe is, well, we don't hear a lion off in the distance. We don't hear sharp sounds. We hear things like prosody of voice. So prosody of voice is how I talk when I'm talking to you, my love. It's how I talk when I'm talking to my inner child, with a gentle, soothing, loving tone. I have been at births on 3 different continents way back in the day, and it's amazing to watch how birthing parents, wherever you are, whatever the native language is, will hold their newborn, in most cases, not all, and will speak to them in the same loving, cooing, tender voice, right? We'll make those noises, those like, ooh, oh, kind of noises as a way to connect, right? To connect with the newborn, with the children, in a way that calms and soothes their nervous system. Lullabies do this. If you look at children's books, particularly the ones that are meant for bedtime, they often have repetition and sort of a gentle rise and fall of the voice. And that's for a very specific reason, to soothe the central nervous system, right? The sympathetic system, and to help you get ventral vagal, safe, seen, connected. So if you don't know what to say to your inner child, you can focus on how you're saying it, right? So if this whole concept is new to you and you're like, I don't know what to say to a kid, I don't know from children, focus really on the energy that you bring to it, right? And you can even start by saying, I see you, inner child. I love you, inner child. I'm here for you, inner child, right? Even just starting there builds that connection and supports your nervous system, helps to bring you whoosh back into ventral vagal. You could even start with singing. So again, the actual lyrics you choose matter less than the energy that you're bringing to it. You could pick your favorite rap song and just sing it in a really soft, melodic, prosodic tone. And your inner child is likely to feel that tenderness and experience that tender energy moving through from you to them. The other thing I often do is if I'm feeling stuckness, if I'm feeling like there's something in my body that doesn't want me to do something, right? Some folks call it resistance. I prefer to think of it as our protector parts, right? The parts of our psyche, our mind, body, spirit that want to protect us from something that feels harmful, right? I start with praising that protector part. So this will often come up for me as procrastination. It'll come up as a sense of fear around vulnerability. I'm doing a webinar next Thursday, which is the 23rd at 7 p.m. It's all about overcoming codependency. And I put the website up. I put the website up for my masterclass, and you can find that at victoriaalbina.com/masterclass. And I put it up, and something inside me started freaking out. I started feeling irritable, restless, uneasy, just like this, like a dis-ease in my body. So I paused. I did what we do, babies. I took a breath in, long out, and I asked, okay, who's here? Who is here and present and alive and awake for me? And it was my 14, 15-year-old wearing a Stussy t-shirt and Jenko jeans because it was the 90s. What's up, kids from the 90s? Holding her skateboard, just you shouldn't do this. And she was firm. She was not having it. She was 0% having it. And that experience was creating this physiologic reaction within me. And so with love, I turned to her and I said, hey babe, I see you're really upset about this. This is really worrying you. Can we talk? And she said, fine. She's so grumpy. It's the core of her personality, right? That she's a rebel. She's pushing against. She's protecting me from things she finds absolutely petrifying, like being vulnerable, putting myself out there, being out in the world, etc. So with her consent, we started to have a conversation. And I asked her what she was so scared of. And she told me, if you put yourself out there, all the other kids will make fun of you. Oh, so tender, right? So tender and sweet and loving. She just loves me and she loves herself and she doesn't want us, right? And all the years of life before her, all those inner children to get made fun of. So she wanted to keep me from doing webinars, from putting my masterclass up there for the world to see, because she was scared that it wouldn't turn out well, which in her mind, again, through a child's lens, is being made fun of. And I just find that so sweet and so loving and so tender. And so with that tender energy, with that love energy, I turned to her and I said, thank you. Thank you for wanting to take care of me and us in this way. Thank you. I know you sent that freak out energy throughout my body, that sympathetic activation of everything's wrong and bad. There's a reason to panic. I know you did that from a place of love. And I want to tell you as an adult, as your adult who loves you, that we're fine. The webinar is going to be great. The people who want to enroll in my masterclass are going to love it. They're going to enroll. They're going to have an amazing time. They're going to have a beautiful experience. Everything is fine. And because we don't BS our inner child, you're right, people could make fun of me. That's possible. And I'm an adult and I have the resources internally to manage that. I can do thought work around that to recognize that what other people think of me is none of my business, is never about me. It's about their own thoughts, because it's their thoughts that create their feelings upon which they take action and create a result. So if their thought work protocol is to make fun of my sales page or not like it or whatever she was worried about someone doing, that's okay. That might happen, and that's okay, right? So of important note here is that I did not bullshit her, right? I didn't lie to her and say, no, that's not going to happen, right? Everything will be fine, because that's not loving. That's not how I want to be spoken to. And so that's not how I'm going to speak to my inner child, right? I'm going to address her as the incredibly smart, loving, caring, thoughtful creature she is. And we'll tell her, yeah, the things that you fear might happen, and I can deal with it. I can manage it, and I can support you in that process so you can deal with it and you can manage it. I'm here for you, my darling. So that was an important conversation that we had recently. I wrote her a letter about it, and that also felt really great. So if talking to your inner child feels really challenging, and from all the messages I got from you all, it sounds like it does. It feel like a really challenging thing. You can start with writing a letter, singing a lullaby, just sweetly showing up to show those little ones that you care. I'm going to keep talking about this theme, but I want to open the floor up for questions. If anyone has questions about the inner child, about your nervous system, about life coaching, thought work, codependency, whatever is up for you right now, please go ahead and type that into the little message bar, and I'll start answering those questions, which I'm always excited to do. I love to give you all exactly what you're here for. So, another really important thing when we're talking about the inner child is to both honor their experience, their wants, and their needs, and to have really healthy adult boundaries. So your inner child might want you to have a whole box of donuts for dinner, and I am not about to demonize that in any way. But if you, for example, know that sugar and flour, gluten, or even gluten-free flour, create a sensation in your body that doesn't serve you, right? Because for me, those two things, flour and gluten, for example, they give me joint pain and they make me feel really lethargic and just like, ugh. So adult me would not want to choose to eat a box of donuts for dinner, but my inner child might want me to, right? And so I can honor that she might want that. And again, I would be truly, deeply kind and loving towards her while saying, thank you so much. Thank you for that offering. I know that sounds really yummy and fun for you, and that may have felt good in your 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old body, but Mama's 40, and it doesn't feel good for me. So I'm not going to do it, and I love you, and I appreciate the suggestion. So the difference there is not saying like, ugh, shut up, like I don't want to hear it. The difference is approaching your inner child, whatever the offering is, with love and care and kindness and acceptance, first and foremost. Radical acceptance of self, right? If one of our goals is to be accepting and loving and to release judgment for others, we get to start at home and then to whoosh, roll those waves of kindness, gentleness, generosity out into the world. And that starts with having really good boundaries, right? With understanding that you get to set limits for your adult self, for your child self, and thus with the world, right? You get to say what works for you and what doesn't. And that's the same conversation if you're having a conversation with another adult creature, a child out in the world, or your inner child within, right? You get to set those limits and boundaries with gentleness and love. My darlings, any questions, please do go ahead and type those in with your little thumbs, and I'll go ahead and answer them. So my beauties, reparenting. Reparenting is the overarching theme of this conversation. So for me, reparenting means recognizing your old habitual patterns, the ways that you show up or don't show up to support your own health and wellness as an adult now, and to recognize where that may be based in not having your needs met as a child, and the stories that you took on about yourself, and whether it's okay to have needs, whether that's a safe or smart thing to do, whether you'll be heard, whether you'll be respected, whether you'll be honored, right? We all learned all sorts of different stories about this in childhood, and that comes through into our adult experience of the world. And so reparenting for me means doing this work of showing up for your inner child on the daily. So that can be around your movement, around your screen time, around looking at your thoughts and the feelings they create. We reparent by talking to ourselves with prosody of voice, with gentleness and love and care. We reparent ourselves daily by asking ourselves the following question: how would my most loving, radically accepting adult parent show up right now for me? And I say adult parent because many of us, and the work I do is to support women with codependency and perfectionism to leave those habits behind and create new habits, to drop the anxiety, the stress, the overwhelm, and to step into confidence. So many of us were raised by parents and other caregivers who may not have been emotional adults. So let me speak to this quickly. I talk a lot in my work about emotional adulthood and emotional childhood. So emotional childhood is when we are just children in adult bodies in terms of our reactions and responses to the world. So this can look like blaming, shaming, guilting, right? Well, I just feel upset because he said that, right? Taking the burden and putting it on someone else, instead of realizing that you actually have the gift of attending to your own adult mind so that you can process your own thoughts and feelings and begin to make shifts there for yourself, which is the thought work that I teach. And so, again, for many of us who grew up with codependency, with perfectionism, with self-doubt, with these codependent thought habits, we were raised by people in adult bodies whose inner child was running the show. Understanding that emotional adults take ownership for their lives, right? Say, I'm feeling upset because of the thoughts that I'm having. Right? I may have been triggered by my nervous system, that sensation, that chemical whoosh adrenaline burst through my body into sympathetic activation. That was physiologic. And then I have the opportunity as an adult to choose my next thought, to choose how I'm going to show up to support myself next. So we get to support our inner children who may have been raised by emotional children, and to recognize those patterns in our lives. Someone writes, I've wanted to begin this work, but I have resistance. How do I bite off little pieces so I don't get overwhelmed? Thank you for that. So I want to pause and reframe resistance as protection. Because resistance is like, I'm just resisting the work, right? Like I'd get so much done if I didn't have resistance. That's how I hear it in my voice, right? In my head, as this like negative thing. And for me, reframing it as protection, self-love, right? An inner child who wants you to not just survive, but thrive. That's the first step for me. So when that sensation comes up, we'll call it protection. Let me know if that feels a little better to think about it as protection. So that's step one. So then the second part, how do I bite off little pieces so I don't get overwhelmed? So I want to look at the issue of overwhelm. So in my work, we recognize, again, two parallel systems: the physiologic nervous system, polyvagal theory, fight, flight, the sympathetic system, ventral vagal, safe and connected, dorsal vagal, shut down. And if you're like, wait, what is she talking about? Listen to episode 61 of the Feminist Wellness Podcast, my podcast. I go into like tons and tons of nerdy detail about polyvagal theory because it is so fascinating. So we understand that system creates sensations, right? Chemical mediated sensations of energy through our body. We then have a thought, often in reaction to that sensation, and that thought creates a feeling in our bodies, which is a top-down experience, a brain-to-body experience. And in that brain-to-body experience, we recognize that, I call that the think, feel, act cycle, and I go through that in a lot of details in episodes. I'm guessing here 33, 34, and 35 is when of the Feminist Wellness Podcast is when I give a ton of detail about that system. And it's a system that I teach all of my clients. Side note, if you want to learn more about it and see me teach the protocol, you can learn it for yourself live for free next Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so overwhelm. Being overwhelmed is not a fact. In that, and I say this with pure love, my darling, what you are experiencing as overwhelm, someone else may not call overwhelm. So we can recognize it as a subjective experience, and we can hold space for it as such with love and tenderness, recognizing that your nervous system may be worked up there, right? Maybe in that sympathetic or heading towards that dorsal shutdown. And so that overwhelmed feeling, that feeling, we can recognize that there is a thought in your mind that's leading you to feel that overwhelm. So it may be, I have to speak to my inner child perfectly. I have to do this healing work perfectly. If I don't do this healing work, XYZ terrible thing will come. Gosh, that does sound overwhelming to think those thoughts. And then the action you would take when you're feeling overwhelmed because you're having those thoughts might look like ruminating. It might look like not diving into having the conversation with your inner child because you're busy thinking about how you might not do it perfectly, you might not do it well, it might not go well, you might not get healed in time, as though in time was a thing. And the result of that would be not showing up for your inner child the way you want to and continuing to feel that stress, that pressure, that burden, that overwhelm. So in looking at that, right, the think, feel, act cycle, circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result, we can find some space in there to feel into the feelings that unintentional thought is provoking in your body, because that's what it's supposed to do. It's doing it perfectly. And then you can choose a new thought to create a new feeling in your body. So perhaps a thought like, I am learning how to reparent myself, right? Dropping the pressure, dropping the perfection, dropping the end goal. I am learning how to reparent myself might create some space for you to feel the potential, to feel self-love, to feel hope. Those could be some feelings that you could create with that new thought. And then you may take the action of having one conversation with your inner child. Just one. And then the result would be that you lived into that thought, that you began to create space to show up for your inner child with love. So, what are some of those baby step ways to show up for your inner child? So, if visually in your mind's eye connecting with your inner child, if that isn't working for you, you could look at a picture of yourself as a child and you could simply feel into it. So at different points in my healing, I've looked at pictures of myself in that 3 to 4 year old phase, which is when we left Argentina and came to the United States, when we went from having this like big, boisterous, loud, amazing family, and we all lived in the same building. So we were, talk about interdependence. We were like in each other's everything. So, and then we moved to the United States and we were alone. We lived in West Philly. My dad worked all day, and we were the only Argentines we knew, right? And so there were several layers of loneliness, otherness, aloneness, sort of lumped all together. And so I used to look at pictures of myself from that time, and I would just connect with my body just to see what I would feel, right? Like what's coming up in my physical body, in my energy body. And often what would come up was this deep well of sadness, right? This deep sadness for that little girl who went from having doting aunties, doting uncles, cousins, abuelos, like all these people and pets and a yard, to this new life in the US. And I sometimes wouldn't even think about the story. I would just really let it be a somatic experience, a physical experience in my body, and tears would just well up. And my work then, as your work may be now, would be just to do that. Just to allow the feelings, to give all of your feelings equal airtime. The sadness, the grief, the anger, the frustration, the disappointment, the joy. And to just hold that space in your heart. So when I say holding space, I mean stepping out of judgment towards radical acceptance, into radical acceptance, maybe a bridge too far, towards radically accepting yourself, your inner child, your physical sensations, your body, your memories, accepting it all exactly as it is, and just choosing to stay with it, to process the feeling through your body without judgment, without attempting to push it away, move it to the side, without attempting to not have it, but rather to just show up for it. If it helps to label it, do so. I feel sad. I feel grief. I feel worry. The next step then is to get your adjectives out. So I feel grief. Let me feel into it. Sadness. I'm thinking about that little me, and some sadness is coming up, which is beautiful. Helps me to process it out. So sadness feels like a heaviness in my chest. Ooh, okay. And a tightness in my throat, around the throat chakra. It's blue. It's heavy. It's still versus moving or vibrating. And it's sort of pulling my body back and down. That's what I feel when I tap into that sadness of that early experience, which was traumatic for me as a little one. So that's the work. The work is to make contact with your inner children, to ask them what they need, what they're experiencing, how old they are, how old they think you are, to get consent to connect, to support them, and to feel into it, to feel into the physical sensation in your body and into the words that are coming up for you when you're feeling those feelings. And once you've processed that feeling all the way through, that's when we can do the thought work that I teach all of my coaching clients. So you can begin to shift your cognitive experience of yourself, your past, your present, your future, with intention, on purpose, sometimes ahead of time. I'm going to be teaching a lot more about the thought work protocol, particularly as it applies to codependency and perfectionism, in a live, totally free webinar next Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern. There's a link in my bio. You know where to go. Register for it. It's free. There's nothing to lose. I'm also going to tell you, much to the chagrin of my inner adolescents, all about my 6-month life coaching masterclass. So it's an online program. It's going to be a blast. It's about half full already, and I'm really, really excited to see you at the webinar to talk more about it and to see if you'd like a seat in the class. All right, my love, if there are any last questions, comments, if I can support you in any additional way before I sign off for today, give those thumbs a workout, type a little question in for me. Oh, there's a little button I didn't know about. Looks like it has a question. How are perfectionism and codependency related? Is one a symptom of the other? Oh my kitten, that is a topic I could talk about for hours. So perfectionism is at its core it's a fear of being judged. It comes up when we hold ourselves to irrational standards, to unmeetable standards, because perfect isn't a real thing. I'll also say that podcast episodes, the Feminist Wellness Podcast episodes 56 and 57 are all about this. So perfectionism is, when you are more worried about how people perceive your outsides than how you perceive your insides. So it's that worry about what others think and feel about you, as though that was something that you could control in any way, shape, or form. And codependency they're sort of parallel, right? They're twins in a way, and one does tend to feed the other one. So they're both about externalization. They're both about putting your focus on other people, on their thoughts and their feelings. One of the things, a visual that's been really helpful for me over the years is that in codependency and in perfectionism, and I can do I'm going live every single day next week because we need it, and I can talk more about this. Let's do it on Monday. Perfectionism on Monday. So let me share that visual real quick and I'll repeat it on Monday for you. So I think about codependency and perfectionism as having this like spotlight on your head that's always scanning the entire world to see what other people think and feel, the actions they're taking, the results they're getting, what's going on. And the work I do is to help you to turn that spotlight around so that your attention, your focus is squarely on you and how to support you. And so again, this root of perfectionism, which I'll talk about so much more on Monday during my Instagram live. I believe it's at 2 p.m. I'll be sure to share that. I'll put it in my stories. So perfectionism is this fear of other people judging us, right? And it's also the concurrent fear of us judging ourselves. I'll pause on that. We'll come back to it on Monday. I have so much more to say about perfectionism. It really is not unlike resentment, right? It's like drinking poison, hoping someone else will die. It's a vicious cycle. But yeah, we'll talk more about that on Monday. Thank you for that prompt. I'm really excited about it. Wild Strawberry Girl, what a fun handle, asks, can you have multiple inner children from different stages? Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So there's different schools of thought about this. I think that we can have thousands of inner children, and that we can, in studying them, connecting with them, really exploring them, we can see sort of themes. So I was talking earlier about my inner adolescent, who's often like, right? Like that's her stance in life. She's kind of standoffish. She's suspicious. She doesn't really trust. She's learned that trusting people, showing her feelings, that these are very dangerous, very stupid, bad things to do. And we've gotten to do a lot of work together, she and I, to help shift that thinking, because I'm a huge fan of vulnerability, which is such a scary thing. And it's one of the best ways I know to grow. So that's my inner adolescent sort of wrapped up. And yes, we can have sort of an archetype of our inner child, right? So of our little baby, of our, like, I often call it like school age self, right? What was that person like? Were they always seeking to please? Were they distracted? Were they bullied or abused? Did they always want to spread joy? Were they scared? Were they very tender? Were they out of touch with their feelings? Like, we can start to recognize some of the core presentations of that school-age child, of that adolescent, so that we can know who they are in the world and how that's still within us, shaping us, supporting us, or holding us back, right? Being a protector that keeps us from doing things that they find very dumb and scary, like feeling your feelings, doing webinars, doing Instagram lives. I mean, that adolescent of mine, together we procrastinated doing Instagram lives for so long because of that fear, that perfectionism, these stories around like, oh, well, if I'm going to do this, it has to be great, versus I'm just going to do this and I'm going to do it from the heart, and I'm going to share the knowledge and the understanding I have. And if it's of service to one human animal, then it was worth it. It was worth the vulnerability and the little vulnerability hangover I'm going to have tomorrow. Which is fine. I'm prepared for it. I've got a bath scheduled, but for real, I scheduled like a bath after this and one for tomorrow, because my inner child gets worked up, and that's great. I recognize her, and I can meet her with love and care from my adult mind with adult words, adult thoughts to create adult feelings. So I can take adult actions and have adult results in my adult life. All right, my beauties. It's about time for me to sign off. Any last questions, type them in there right away. Oh, we've one popped up in here. How do I take care of my inner child while I'm living with my parents who continue to make me feel unloved and never good enough? My angel, it sounds like you are suffering, and my heart goes out to you. Tender one. So this is a big answer. It's a big question with a very, very big answer. The work really starts with having that tenderness and love and care for the part of you that feels unloved by them, for the part of you that feels never good enough, right? So you start by giving that part of you so much care, so much gentleness, so much love, and you get into alliance, right? So it's not your inner child feeding you these thoughts of like, and then your adult self trying to interpret all of this. Instead, you can work to really be allies and even accomplices with the part of you that feels like your parents don't love you and feels that you're never good enough, right? That make you feel unloved and never good enough. And so the next part, once you've really established that tender, loving connection, is to do some of the work we've been talking about. Asking your inner child what they need, really connecting inward, getting consent, showing them love, and asking how you can be your best parent who can show up to support you and your inner child, your inner children, to feel loved and to know that you are in fact perfect. You are so far beyond good enough. You are perfection because you were born perfect. If you want a little support, a little mantra to hear this, sorry, when I look away, there's a list of my podcast episodes on the wall. So I want to invite you to listen to the episode from January 2nd, number 46 of the Feminist Wellness Podcast. It's called My Vision for You, and it's a love note that I wrote to all my listeners. Give that a listen. Invite your inner children to listen to it too. It's free on all the places you get podcasts. Nothing to lose. But remind yourself, mantra-like, I am good enough. I am loved. I am lovable. And we bring the thought work in. So the thought work I teach, which I've been alluding to throughout this live, is that circumstances happen in our lives. And we can look at them, and this is a thought exercise, right? Through the lens of seeing them as neutral. And then recognize we have a thought about whatever fact happened, and that creates a feeling in our bodies upon which we take action, or from which we take action, and that creates a result. So if the thought in your head is the circumstance, for example, here could be, my parents said words. And then you have the thought, they think I'm unlovable, or they think I'm not enough. You will create those feelings, recreate those feelings in your body. And that original thought is likely coming from your inner child, which is why I recommended first and foremost to attend to that little one, to give that little one a lot of love before you started on the thought work. So the circumstance here is your parents said words, for example, and I don't know the actual situation. Your thought may be, they don't love me. The feeling would be unlovable, unloved, not worthy, sad, fearful. Try those on, see what feels right. The action you may take, and again, I'm making this one up because we're not in active conversation, may be to ruminate, right? To spin in these thoughts of, my parents think I'm unlovable, what does this mean for my life? And really to spin out around that, which is something I used to do all the time. And then the result of that is that you reify or make stronger this thought connection in your head that you are in fact unlovable. When what actually happened was that your parents said words or failed to say words that you wanted them to say because of their own limitations as human animals. And so what you get to do is to feel all of that in your body, process it through your body like we talked about earlier, and then you get to choose if that old thought and feeling serve you or if there's something that you want to shift and to create a new intentional thought around. So an intentional thought could be, my parents have their limitations. And then the way you feel when they say words or fail to say words could be neutral. Understanding that their words or failure to use the words you want them to be using actually has literally nothing to do with you as a human. It has to do with their limited capacities as an adult who's probably maybe a child living in an adult body, right? A wounded child. So from there, from that place of getting neutral around it, you then may take the action to support your inner child, to give your inner child some love, right? And the result of that could be continuing to understand your parents' limitations and not see them as your problem or as anything that has to do with you. So that's just one example of how to use the thought work protocol that I teach my life coaching clients every single day. Again, I'm doing a live webinar next Thursday, which is April 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's free, and I'm going to be going into a lot more detail about the thought work protocol. So make sure you head on over to the link in bio and register for that. Go do it now. All right, my sweet loves, please send me your questions, send me your concerns. As you'll see, some people wrote in situations, right? This is happening, what do I do? And I love to answer those. So email those to me, podcast@victoriaalbina.com. Send me a DM here. That's nice and easy. And I will be going live literally every day next week in order to support you through this 67th week of quarantine. Like, I don't even know what year it is at this point. So thank you, my loves. Thank you so much for showing up, for spending some time focusing on supporting your perfect inner children. Mwah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sending you big love. Be well, stay safe. And remember, you are safe, you are held, you are loved. And when one of us heals, we help heal the world. Be well, darling ones. Ciao, ciao.